About 1.5% of 8-year-olds in the United States have been diagnosed with an autism spectrum disorder. While twin studies suggest that genetics play the dominant role in terms of ASD risk, environmental triggers are likely present as well, and increasing scrutiny has fallen on maternal diabetes. Now a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association by Zhang and colleagues leverages the huge Kaiser Permanente database to disentangle pre-existing maternal diabetes from gestational diabetes in terms of ASD risk. The authors looked at 300,000 live births. Of those, about 1% would result in an ASD diagnosis if the mother had no diabetes whatsoever. Compare that to a rate of 1.8% in women with pre-existing diabetes. Now, for gestational diabetes, it depended when you were diagnosed. Prior to week 26, the rate of ASD diagnoses was 1.8%, but after week 26, the rate was no different than the general population. Looking at those numbers, you might conclude that early in utero exposure to the diabetic milieu, be it high glucose levels or high insulin levels, is detrimental to the fetus. But the authors actually conclude that pre-existing maternal diabetes is not a risk factor for ASD. They state that after controlling for maternal factors like age, race, comorbidities, and others, the association between pre-existing maternal diabetes and ASD goes away, whereas early gestational diabetes and ASD remains robust. So what's happening here? Is it plausible that diabetes only affects the fetus when it crops up right in the beginning of pregnancy? Maybe women with pre-existing diabetes were better treated, but even after adjustment for anti-diabetes medications, the associations didn't change much. No, what I think is happening here is a bit of a statistical error. A moment ago, I mentioned that the authors adjusted for maternal comorbidities, and that made the association between pre-existing diabetes and ASD go away. Now, if you adjust for a comorbidity that lies along the causal pathway between diabetes and ASD, you will falsely destroy that relationship. What's more, if those comorbidities are better captured among women with pre-existing diabetes than gestational diabetes, which I think is plausible, you would falsely conclude that only gestational diabetes is a risk factor. What I would conclude from this study is that diabetes of any stripe is probably a risk factor for ASD, although a very small one. What remains to be seen, of course, is whether treatment of diabetes will reduce that risk. You can bet if that trial is done, we will cover it in 150 seconds. For MedPage Today, I'm Perry Wilson.